Good morning, Dan and Amy. Rachel Maddow over at MSNBC, or is it Chris Hayes? I can never tell the two apart.
Hey.
She's a super spreader of fertilizer.
Oh.
South Dakota has just set new records in the number of people hospitalized. New cases and overall active cases with a 36% spike in COVID-19 hospitalizations in the last week. The state now has the highest per capita rate of hospitalizations in the U.S. You have to go after Governor Kristi Noem and South Dakota because they have taken a light touch approach to the COVID-19 response in that state. They never shut down.
Never did.
Kristi Noem responding.
Oh, I love her, by the way.
Stop spreading fear. Only 8% of South Dakota's hospital beds are occupied by COVID-19 patients.
8%.
We have and will continue to manage our resources to care for the people who need help. The people of South Dakota have accomplished this without draconian lockdown. Hashtag facts, not fear. Well, when the facts aren't with you, you have to instill fear, and that's what's happening. And it's the same thing that happens to President Trump per the rallies he's doing when Joe Biden isn't, because who would show up? These super spreader events that also turn out to be not, just like Rachel Maddow's characterization of South Dakota that turns out to be not. It was the first rally that he held in Tulsa. That was supposed to be a super spreader event. It potentially could have extended the number of cases and the seriousness of the spread in Oklahoma. And actually, you had some academics on the West Coast look at it, and they couldn't find any evidence that there was any connection between Trump's rally and an increase in COVID cases in Oklahoma. And then it was Sturgis, you just mentioned.
Right.
And now it's just everywhere. Everywhere anybody goes where there's a crowd is a super spreader event, and anybody who interacts with anybody in a group of people is reckless and is putting grandma and grandpa's life at risk, and so on and so forth.
That doesn't pertain to rallies and riots and looting. They don't look at that group and say, oh, there's a super spreading event, and a lot of those people don't have masks on.
That's right.
And if they do, it's right to conceal themselves so they don't get busted by the cops.
Well, that's because, as public health officials have noted, combating institutional racism is also a public health issue. So you have competing public health issues, and the righteousness of the cause apparently provides some sort of vaccine against COVID-19. That's what I understand. I don't know. I don't know how else to process it.
I don't like because the media is trying to have states fail. Like, they are chomping at the bit to have more cases and more deaths in South Dakota. South Dakota has 210 deaths, and the increase that they have are asymptomatic kids, mostly from colleges, that have returned to their state.
For more on this, as well as the Supreme Court vacancy and the nomination, which will be announced by the president tomorrow, we're pleased to be joined again by Gerard Baker, editor-at-large, Wall Street Journal. Gerard, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again.
You wrote a little bit about super spreading and that ubiquitous accusation from the left to anything that resembles people enjoying life. So what do you make of the fear mongering that persists from the left about COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, as you both said, it is kind of a miraculous. We're learning so many things about this virus, and I think one of the most fascinating is its miraculous capacity to apparently, strike people really badly if they're attending, if they're partying, or they're attending a motorcycle rally, or they're attending a Trump rally, but to leave them completely untouched, like the angel. The story of the Passover, in Exodus, that somehow if you that the angel of death passes over you if you have the rights. If you do the right thing, if you believe the right thing. So, as you just said, so if you attend a Black Lives Matter rally, or you're taking part in mass protests or rioting or looting or whatever, somehow you don't get sick. But if you're, by the way, if you want to attend a family funeral, or you want to go to a party or go to an event or meet your meet relatives, you're going to be struck down. It just is, the lunacy of it obviously is on one level laughable. But again, what it points to is just this authoritarian nature. These people just want to tell you that they've wanted this. I do think in many ways what we're seeing with COVID, is the kind of is the realization of the hopes and political aspirations of people on the left for so long. They've always wanted to be able to tell you what to do with your lives. That's fundamentally what socialism, what the left really believes. Government, you should do what you're told by government. Government decides what you should do, and you just fall in line and get on with it. And COVID is giving them this fabulous opportunity to do that by, saying you've got to wear a mask, you've got to stay in, you can't do this, you can't do that. Everything you do must be approved. It was that extraordinary scene we saw this week of that woman being physically arrested and hauled away from a high school football game because she wasn't wearing a mask. This is the kind of society, the kind of system, the kind of political system that much of the left have wanted for a very long time, and they just are absolutely kind of hugging themselves because they're actually being allowed to get away with it.
And if you lived here in Illinois, my God, we can't go to school, we can't play sports, not some fall sports, but not all fall sports, and I feel like we live in a communist country.
I've been in New York, so I've been in New York City throughout the entire lockdown. And by the way, New York City, the place which to this day still has the worst record of COVID deaths. I mean, you're just talking about South Dakota, a couple of hundred COVID deaths. New York City had 20-something thousand COVID deaths. Obviously more people here, but per head of population, New York's got one of the worst rate in the country to this day.
This is the worst rate in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we've had very few cases since about midsummer. But we are still basically locked down. Restaurants still can't open. Restaurants are supposed to open next week. We'll see how that goes. Schools, half the schools in New York City are still basically closed. So, but again, this is the sort of utopia, the utopia that the left have always looked for and are now embracing, which is you stand in line, you're told what to do. We will tell you when you can live your life and how you can live your life and when you can live your life in the way that we expect you to. And this is it. This is the realization of their dream.
President Trump announces his selection to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the High Court tomorrow. I think it's going to be Amy Coney Barrett. And apparently so does the left, because they've spent this week working to do the bidding of Democrat senators by attacking Amy Coney Barrett's religious beliefs and her alleged affiliation with a group called People of Praise. A Villanova law professor, of all things, Massimo Fagioli, writes in Politico why Amy Coney Barrett's religious beliefs aren't off limits, and he makes all sorts of assertions about People of Praise, and he wants all sorts of information about that to make sure that she's not a theocrat who is going to institute biblical law over secular law as a member of the High Court. It sounds like whether it's Di-Fi leading the Inquisition or not, the dogma lives loudly within her will punctuate any confirmation hearing that the Senate deigns to offer.
Yeah, look, I mean, on display in the next few weeks, if it is Amy Coney Barrett, as people seem to think it's going to be, we'll hear tomorrow. The spectacle we're going to see and hear in the next few weeks is going to be another of the kind of the left's, of a realization of the left's kind of ideals, which is, I mean, anti-Christian, particularly anti-Catholic bigotry, is pretty well the only acceptable bigotry that's actually left in this country. Can you imagine if it were a Muslim who were, a candidate for the Supreme Court and being questioned about her religion and whether or not her religion was actually incompatible with being a federal judge in this country? Can you imagine, quite rightly, the outrage that people have? There's freedom of religion in this country. Can you imagine the outrage that people would have about that? But because this is a Catholic with views that are in line with the Catholic Church's teachings, and which tens of millions of Americans believe too, because she's a Catholic, these are completely unacceptable views that are apparently supposedly inconsistent with being able to administer justice. It's just, again, as impressive as Amy Coney Barrett is, and again, if it is her, and as remarkable a figure as she will be, I do fear slightly the spectacle that we're going to have to watch in the next couple of weeks as she is. They can't go after her for supposedly taking part in gang rapes while she was in college, like they did with Brett Rivers.
Yeah. Although who knows?
But who knows? I mean, anything's possible, especially if Michael Avenatti gets involved. He's the one who, spread that unbelievable claim and got these actors actresses to come forward claiming of these gang rapes. I mean, what's to say to stop him from doing something similar to Amy Coney Barrett?
That's true. That's true. I shouldn't do it. I mean, I absolutely. I mean, we'll see we'll see what they come up with. But one thing we know they will come up with is they will go after her for her Catholicism. And this, by the way, irony of ironies, at the time when the Democratic Party is running as their candidate a Catholic who will, if he's elected, will be only the second Catholic elected president of the United States now. But of course, his views, his version of Catholicism is of course acceptable to the left, so nobody challenges that. But no, it is a. This is an anti-religious war. And as I say again, it's only Christians, conservative Christians, evangelical Christians, Catholics, people who hew to what are orthodox traditional Christian positions, who don't by any means, especially like Amy Coney Barrett, mean that they impose those views, her Catholic views, on anybody else from the bench. She hasn't done that as a federal judge already, and she won't do that as a member of the Supreme Court. But we will hear how in the next 2 or 3 weeks how that religious belief, that religious faith is incompatible with being a member of the Supreme Court, with being a leading member of the government of the United States.
Well, imagine these sorts of questions if the nominee was Muslim or Jewish. This, again, going back to the professor from Villanova, who I miss. He's not a law professor; he's a theology professor. This is what he writes, Fagioli from Villanova. To whom has Barrett made a vow of obedience? What is its nature and scope? What are the consequences of violating it? And he argues that this all speaks to question about her independence as a judge. Because of her affiliation, not with the church, but potentially with this specific charismatic Catholic group, People of Praise. Could you imagine that sort of question being asked of somebody of a different faith?
No, I mean, it would be not only would it be considered unacceptable, you would be told that you were a bigot for raising that question. And I've got to say here, the media once again, is disgracing and beclowning themselves over this issue. There were a couple of pieces this week which I think probably led to that Fagioli, that Politico piece. A couple of Newsweek ran a piece this week saying essentially that Amy Coney Barrett was a member of this People of Praise group, which was the model for The Handmaid's Tale,
right? Which is untrue.
This dystopian vision, and it's completely uncomplete. By the way, and amusingly, they actually, when this was pointed out, they ran a correction at the bottom of the article saying that there's no evidence whatsoever that this organisation was the model for The Handmaid's Tale. But the article still stands. The headline, I think it eventually changed the headline, but the story still stands. This complete lie, this total fiction. That this is, this organization that Amy Coney Barrett belongs to, which is a charitable organization where people are committed. Actually, they don't take vows of obedience, all that nonsense. It's just it's a Christian organization, an organization that's committed to doing good works and to religious organization. It doesn't in any way impose obligations on anyone in it that are inconsistent with being an American citizen. It's just, but the media just are allowed to get away with this stuff. And in a way, as you say, if it were anybody else, they would never even dare to do so.
He is Gerard Baker, editor-at-large, Wall Street Journal. Gerard Baker, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 646